Hey guys, Light is here, and in today's video I want to talk about thirst, and in particular, how thirsty every single Genshin Impact character truly is, both in traditional sense and a little bit unconventional, depending on the characters themselves. Now, let's begin with our first character by the name of Barbara. Now, Barbara is a priest, as well as an idol, which makes her quite thirsty for attention. She also is a hydro applicator, which she literally wills water, so her thirst is immeasurable, both for attention and as water. So for that reason I'll put her at the ocean tier, because most likely she will never have her thirst quenched, as attention is pretty much like a life force for her, and she just sucks it dry from everybody around her, just to keep her useful and gather more attention along the way. Now, Ito. The only thing Ito is thirsty for is attention as well, just like Barbara, but unlike Barbara, Ito doesn't actually resolve himself to a shady tactics to garner attention. He just gains it because he's awesome. So for that reason, I'll put him at a C tier, just because he might also be thirsty for money in the future. He's not right now, but as debts pile up, you never know, he might realize that he's an actual gang leader and decide to make some heists in the future, and the thirst for money is quite high in ranking system, so for that reason he goes into C tier. Now, Beidou. Beidou is a pirate, which means that she pretty much just spends her majority of her free time on the sea, and as we all know, pirates drink only rum. And rum doesn't actually quench your thirst, which means that she drinks even more of it. So for that reason, I'll put her at a river tier, just because we don't know how much she drinks. She never actually been seen drinking. So for that reason, for now in the river tier, but possibly C tier or even ocean tier, just depends on the volume of her drinking habits. Now, Albedo. Albedo is an actual artificial human. He's an actual AI that was sent by the Cyberlife from the future, which means that he doesn't have any primal needs, so thirst is not an emotion that he's familiar with. However, he is exceptionally thirsty for knowledge, as his master left him with a final request of finding the truth of this world, which means that his thirst is most likely also unquenchable, as he most likely will never find the truth of this world, so he's bound to just garner knowledge for the rest of his life. And that's quite admirable. So for that reason, I'll put him at the top of I'd say C tier. He probably has a little bit more of a thirst than Ito does, at least at the current moment. So for that reason, C tier. Now, Amber. Amber is the only outrider within Knights of Favonius, which means that she pretty much just patrols by herself 24/7 on a glider. And those gliders consume a lot of energy from what I know. So for that reason, she probably needs to drink a lot just to keep herself hydrated so she doesn't pass out. So for that reason, I think I'll put her at above Beidou, just because we at least know that she expends massive amount of energy. Unlike Beidou, who we only know is traveling a lot, but we just don't know what else she's doing in her spare time. So for a known factor, Amber is a little bit above her. Now, Aloy. Aloy is an actual hunter that was isekai into Teiyat, which means that she expends a lot of energy just hunting animals just to survive and maybe earn a little bit of pocket money on the side. And hunting is a hard job to do. It expends a lot of energy, it makes you really thirsty. So she probably needs a lot of water. But at the same time, hunting within Genshin Impact is probably one of the easiest things you can do, as you can pretty much just smack them with your sword, like walk up to a wild boar and just stab them with a sword and they die immediately and they just give you meat. So hunting is quite easy in Genshin Impact, which means it might not require as much energy as in her homeworld. So for that reason, I'll stick her a late tier for now. Now, Bennett. Bennett is one of the most unlucky people to ever existed. So he most likely would die of thirst at any given moment. So his thirst for just good luck is unquenchable. He just prays for once to have like a treasure or something, instead of getting shocked by lightning. So just for his admirable attitude towards life and his never-ending thirst for just goodwill and good luck for him and people around him, I think I'll stick him probably at the bottom of a C tier, just because I think that his thirst for positive vibes and attitude is quite admirable in my retrospect, and for that reason, C tier for now. Now, Chongyun. Chongyun is an embodiment of an icicle, which means that he's pretty much 80% water himself, and he's also 80% of the time eating an icicle, which is a water just frozen with a little bit of flavor inside. So he drinks a lot just to keep himself hydrated and also to not get a heat stroke in the process. So for that reason, I think I put him at the top of a river tier. Just because he only eats icicles. He doesn't actually drink any water, and he also is made of ice, which is water but it's in a solid state, which means that he might be thirsty, but it will take much longer for him to get hydrated, unlike a lot of these characters at the top. And his thirst is more primal, which is not as impressive as some of those other characters above him. So for that reason, top of a river tier for now. Now, Diluc. Diluc is a winery owner, but he doesn't drink. However, he does drink something besides alcohol, which is apple cider and grape juice. And he probably drinks a lot of it because he needs to keep up an appearance of a mafia boss. And as we all know, to keep an underground image, you need to drink a lot, otherwise nobody will respect you. And for that reason, I think I stick him at a probably top of a C tier for now, because image is quite important for Diluc, and he needs to keep it straight for everyone to know that he's actually means business. That's why he's sipping on his grape juice while everybody else drinking wine, as a true man should. Now, Diona. Diona actually hates liquor, which means that she doesn't actually drink anything. She probably just a mere sight of liquor just makes her want to throw up. So her thirst is quite low. But she is a cat, and from what I know, cats drink quite a bit of water, because they always clean themselves and it requires a lot of effort. So for that reason, I think I stick her at the bottom of lake tier for now. We'll see how it goes from there. Now, Eula. The only thing that Eula is thirsty for is vengeance, as well as proving to others that she's an actually good person, which is admirable. But her thirst for vengeance is not really because it's kind of cringe, but just because she wants to prove to others she's a good person, and that's a good thirst to have, because it means that she's willing to develop and grow as a person. So her thirst is admirable, but just because her thirst for vengeance lowering her a little bit, I think I'll push her probably at the top of a lake tier for now. But we'll see how it goes from there. Now, Fischl. Fischl is a weeaboo, which means that she likes to roleplay a lot, and probably cosplay. And that stuff takes a lot of energy and money. So her thirst is for attention mostly. And that, as we know from Barbara, is quite an important thirst to have, as it makes you more goal-oriented, which I kinda appreciate personally, as it makes you more admirable in a way. But she is speaking in a weird way, which makes her less admirable, unlike somebody like Diluc maybe. So, for that reason, I think I'll stick her probably at the bottom of a C tier, just because her thirst for attention is quite high, but she tries her best to appear as a mysterious anime character all the time, and she only talks to Oz. So for that reason, her thirst for attention is quite high, but not as high as Barbara's. So for that reason, bottom of a C tier for now. Now, let's talk about Ganyu. Ganyu is an interesting case, as the only thirst that I could think of for her is the thirst for human emotions, as she is quite lacking in that aspect, as she doesn't understand humans, but she wishes to, and she tries her best to do so. So it shows her thirst for human connection, just to have something in common with other people. Now, Goro. Goro is a dog as well as a general, and both of those combined bring an incredible amount of thirst, as dogs are always thirsty, always seek water, and he's gross as a general also brings him thirst for military power, as well as maybe Kokomi's affections, so she would call him a good boy whenever he brings her victory. So his thirst for being called a good boy is quite high, and for that reason I think it's ocean, because as we all know, there's never enough head pats you can give to a dog. They always want more, and it's never ending thirst. They could never be quenched no matter how hard they try. However, he's not quite on the same level as Barbara, so he's a little bit below her. Now Hu Tao. Hu Tao has an interesting thirst, which is for burying people. She tries her absolute best to make sure that others are persuaded in the best way possible to arrange their funeral at the earliest convenience, as in her own words, never a bad time to pass away. So for that reason, I think I'll stick her probably at the top of a river tier, as having a thirst for burying people is a little bit unsettling, but I respect her conviction, and for that reason, top of a river tier. Now let's talk about Jean. Now Jean has a never-ending thirst of being pretty much a role model for everyone and everything. As she works her ass off, she always tries her best to pretty much just push herself almost in a narcoleptic state. As she never sleeps, the only thing that she does is work and read romance novels, which is a second thirst that she has for romance, and that is quite an unquenchable thirst to have. But she never shows it, so others don't know that. However, we do know that. So just because of an unknown factor for other characters, I can't put her too high, but as a workaholic, that's an incredible thirst to have, and it's a problem that she needs to work on. No matter how hard it is, she can get through it. I believe in her, and for that reason, I think I stick her a little bit below Hu Tao, in the middle of a river tier. Now Kazuha. Kazuha is a vagrant as well as samurais, and as we all know, samurais drink a lot of sake, but Kazuha is never seen with sake, which makes him a little bit of an unconventional samurai. But his thirst for revenge is non-existent, as when his friend passed away, which makes him rank even lower in my opinion. But he does have a thirst for poetry, so he's an artistic thirster. And for that reason, I think I'll stick him at above Eula, at the top of a lake tier. Our thirst for artistic purposes is quite admirable, as he tries his best to bring other people joy in the best way he can, and I respect that a lot. Now let's talk about Kaya. And Kaya, in my opinion, is one of the most thirstiest characters in Genshin Impact, just because of the amount of thirst he has for different subjects and reasons. First of which being thirst for revenge against gods that pretty much destroyed his entire country and killed every single person that he ever knew and loved, most likely. So that thirst is quite high for him. Another thirst being his thirst for his brother Diluc and his affection that he never shows, because Diluc is quite the tsundere type, but he will strive to get it no matter what, and he knows his goals, which I admire a lot. Now his third, and probably one of the most thirstiest things about him, is that his thirst for tricking people and making sure that they have the worst time possible based on his story quest, as he gains quite a lot of enjoyment from it. So I'd say he's an ocean tier, probably even the top of an ocean tier, because just unlike Barbara just seeks attention, but Kaya just seeks everything and from everyone. He will stop at nothing to make sure that his thirst is like a rain. It never stops pouring, and when it pours, it rains, you know? So for that reason, top of an ocean tier. Now Kamisato Ayaka. Now Ayaka is thirsty for one thing and one thing only, which is making sure that others around her are well off, as well as being thirsty for Traveler, but that's beside the point. They're just an aftermath of her actions. So for that reason, I think I'll stick her probably at a little bit above Chongyun, as she's not as thirsty as other characters on this tier list, but she does have convictions, and she will thirst for them no matter what. So for that reason, I think middle of the river tier is her rightful place. Now let's talk about Kachin. Kachin is a skeptic unlike any other. They hail from an extremely wealthy family, and her thirst comes from her pretty much just despising everyone and everything around her, as well as making sure that others are having the worst time possible. But at the same time, she just wants everyone to be happy, and she will do whatever it takes to make sure that that's the case, even if it means sacrificing her own time and efforts. So she has a little bit of double personality, and her thirst for attention because of it is quite high, as she even cosplays a lot just to gain attention no matter what. So for that reason, I'll stick her probably at the bottom of a C tier, just because cosplayers get a lot of attention and she would most likely want even more. No matter how much she gets, she probably will never be satisfied, but her cosplay thirst is not high enough for me to rank her in an ocean tier for now. Maybe in the future, we'll see about that. Now, Klee. Klee is a child that is pretty much a mass destruction seeker who would stop at nothing to make sure that everything within her path is thoroughly destroyed. And in order to throughout seek this destruction, she needs a lot of energy, which she most likely gains from sugar, as she most likely steals it from Dilek. She just goes to his winery and begs him to make her grape juice in large supplies that she carries around in her backpack, along with her explosives. So, for that reason, her thirst for explosions and grape juice probably are quite high. And for that reason, I'll push her probably a little bit below Dilek, as Dilek is kind of her dad and he takes care of her, so he probably supplies her with massive amount of sugar and grape juice just to make her hyped up as much as possible, so she goes on her tirades for mass destructions and doesn't have any worries to be concerned about. So for that reason, a little bit above Albedo, because her thirst is quite monumental, unlike Albedo's. Albedo just thirsts for knowledge. Klee seeks destruction whenever she goes, so that thirst is quite more impact than Albedo's in my opinion. So for that reason, she's right there. Now let's talk about Kuja Sarah. Kuja Sarah has an unquenchable thirst, which is a thirst for orders. She will stop at nothing to make sure that Raiden, her pretty much owner at this point, and the leader in a sense, just gives her orders that she could follow, as if she doesn't have orders, she pretty much just doesn't know how to function as a normal human being. So for that reason, I'll put her in an ocean tier, because her thirst for commands as a submissive type is never ending. She will stop at nothing to seek them, and if Raiden doesn't respond to her, she pretty much just lost and doesn't know what to do. For that reason, bottom of an ocean tier. Now Lisa. Ocean tier? I don't think I need to explain it, but let me just give you a little bit of insight in case you're a little bit new to the game. Now, I'm pretty sure after the story quest of Lisa, you will understand why she's in an ocean tier, but I will not talk about that, as everybody knows it. What I will talk about that, however, is that her thirst for knowledge is quite high, as she's a high-ranking witch. So, she's in an ocean tier because she's thirsty for Traveler 90% of the time, and I don't think I need to explain myself for that, so let's move on. Now, let's talk about Aether. Now, Aether doesn't have emotions, even in the slightest. The only emotions has is mild amusement and mild sadness, which makes him pretty much a puddle tier, because he doesn't really have convictions. The only conviction that he has is fighting his sister, which pretty much he can just call like cell phones as a thing, and like just SMS her, I don't know, just call her on WhatsApp, just say where are you, and they pretty much met like at least 3 times, and every single time he just calls her name and doesn't say anything else. So his thirst even to find his sister is not that great, and for that reason he's just pretty much in the puddle tier for now. But he does have a thirst which I think is quite important, which is a hatred for Paimon, as we all have. So he potentially is a lake tier at least, but he doesn't display that. And if he did, we probably would all put him in an ocean tier, but just because he doesn't display see like hatred for Paimon, we all will agree that he's in the puddle tier for now, but potentially ocean tier in the future. Which is the same goes for his sister Lumine, but she's a little bit below him, as unlike Aether. She pretty much just doesn't have any personality whatsoever. Aether at least has a little bit of something going on, but Limine just doesn't. She's pretty much like a downgrade of Aether in a way, so she's like a older version of this cyborg over here. So for that reason, they both in the panel here. Now Mona. Mona has a massive thirst for knowledge as well as money, because she never has any, because she spends all of it on knowledge and astrology books. So her thirst is substantial because she actually can't live normally, as she even sacrifices her own well-being in order to satisfy her knowledge. So which is quite an admirable thing to have. For which reason I think I'll push her at the top of a C tier, just because unlike a lot of these other characters, she actually sacrifices her own life in a sense, as she doesn't eat, probably doesn't sleep, all she does is learn new stuff and makes money somehow, not sure how, but she does, as she spends it all on books. So for that reason, top of a C tier. Now Ning 1. The only thing Ning 1 is thirsty for is gathering other people's weaknesses as well as money. So her financial thirst is unquenchable, as she only makes money and she only thinks about money. And the only thing that she does at anything, if there's no money involved, she won't do it. So for that reason, I think she probably top 3 of the notion here. Just because she only cares about money, unlike those two, which I think attention is a little bit of a higher thirst than money, as it's a little bit less tangible, because she actually has money, and she only has attention from weebs and her simps, so she doesn't have attention from a lot of normal people. And Kaya is just in a league of his own. He's probably just above everyone in here involved. But for the sake of this now, Ning 1 is top 3. Now Noel. The only thing Noel is thirsty for is pretty much just becoming a knight of Favonius and pleasing others, which is not a very great thirst to have, as she doesn't care about herself whatsoever. She doesn't have a single selfish third, and she probably would go on a hunger strike if her master orders it. So for that reason, I'll think I stick her at the top of the puzzle tier, just because unlike those two cyborgs, she at least has some emotions, but she only cares about others, which I think downgrades her quite a bit. But she doesn't have any selfishness whatsoever, which makes her an extremely good person. But thirst is not about being good, it's about having motivation, goals, and achieving them no matter what. For that reason, as a good person, she goes into puddle tier. Now let's talk about Chichi. Now Chichi has a limited amount of emotions because she's a zombie, so she doesn't have a lot of thirst, but what she does have is thirst for pummeling Kutao's face whenever she sees her, because she just doesn't like her, as well as a thirst for coconut milk. So those two thirsts are quite substantial, as she has a little bit of hatred towards Kutao, which in my opinion is a pretty cool thirst to have, because at least like those three, she has something going on. But that's not enough to put her at a river tier in my opinion, but it is enough to put her at the top 3 of a lake tier, at least for now. Next, let's talk about Radiant Shogun. Now, Radiant Shogun has one thirst and one thirst only, and that is Dunga Milk, as well as Eternity, but she kind of threw that out the window, so we're gonna talk about just Dunga Milk. And her thirst for Dunga Milk is insatiable. Her thirst for sweets is probably one of the greatest. The only thing, while she leaves her weeb realm, where she just meditates all day and practice solidarity, is to gather sweets, and Dunga Milk in particular. And if she could spend the entire Inazuma budget on it, she probably would. And for that reason, I think I put her a little bit below Mona in the C tier, just because her convictions are pretty much thrown out the window when it comes to her thirst for sweets. So for that reason, she goes into top 2 and top 3 of the C tier, but not high enough for the ocean tier, as her convictions are pretty much non-existent at this point. She just accepted that others can just do whatever they want, and all she cares about is sweets at this point. And if she can have a lifetime supply of Dunga Milk within her realm, she probably would never leave it again. So for that reason, she might be a little bit above Mona, but not for now, because at least she doesn't sacrifice her well-being for her thirst, unlike Mona does. So yeah, let's go with that. Now Razor. Razor is a wolf boy, which means his thirst is primal. He probably only cares about thirst as in primal thing, so as long as he has a little bit of water going on, he most likely will just be happy. So for that reason I'll put him at the top of puddle tier, just because unlike Noel, he at least a little bit selfish, as he cares about his own well-being most likely. And he also has a cute side to him as he cares about others a little bit, and he thirsts a little bit for other characters. As in the sense of he wants them to be happy, and he's like a little puppy that would follow you around and make sure that you're okay. So for that reason, top of a puddle tier, as he doesn't have a lot of selfishness going on for him. And this tier is mostly based on thirst for selfish reasons. For that reason, good people pretty much just go into puddle tier, as well as androids that don't have any emotions at all. Now let's talk about Rosaria. Rosaria is thirsty for pretty much just being an outcast. She doesn't want to follow rules. She pretty much just like a rebel. She thirsts for attention in a way of just making other people not like her, but at the same time it's kind of hard, and she makes other people feel like they're below her. So her thirst for putting down others as well as bringing herself up in the process is quite admirable. And as a very dominant woman, she knows what she wants, and I respect that. For that reason, I'll put her in the middle of a river tier, right above Chongyun, right there. Now, let's talk about Kokomi. Kokomi, in my opinion, is quite a thirsty character in the sense of that her thirst for rest, and she never gets any, as well as thirst for knowledge, so she could use it for the betterment of the other people, as well as making sure that there's no other people suffering. It's quite admirable, but it doesn't have a lot of growth potential just because the war that was going on between her and Raiden Shogun has already ended, which means that her thirst is already quenched in a sense. But just because of a prospect of her having a thirst like that in the future and having it grow, I think I'll stick her probably above Chichi at about top 3 of Lake tier for now, just because her thirst just doesn't have a lot of growth potential. But if you will, she would probably be around C tier in the future, but for now, top 3 of Lake tier. Now let's talk about Sayu. Sayu has an interesting thirst, as her only thirst in life is growing taller, and she will stop at nothing to make that happen, going as far as pretty much just sleeping 23 hours of the day, and just 1 hour doing whatever else she needs just to basically survive and work in a sense, so Ayato doesn't kick her out. So for that reason, I think her thirst is quite admirable. She knows what she wants and she will do anything just to get it done. And for that reason, I think I stick her at the top of a river tier, just because her thirst is more primal and she just wants the one thing, she doesn't care about anything else. So I don't think she has quite as much potential as characters above her, but she does have a lot of potential in the future maybe, if she can apply that thirst for other things. For that reason, top of a river tier. Now let's talk about Shenhe. Shenhe has 0 emotions pretty much, but she could display emotions of hatred and anger, which makes her thirsty for violence and destruction, just like Lee. But most of the time she does manages to suppress it. So for that reason, I think I'll stick her at the bottom of a river of a C tier, just because her destruction, like seeking thirst, is probably will never be quenched and she will never get rid of it. But just because she doesn't display it a lot, she has potential but she doesn't display it, I think I put her at the bottom of a C tier, but it is a potential for an ocean tier in the future. Now let's talk about Sucrose. Now Sucrose is only thirsty for one thing and one thing only, which is experiments, as well as pleasing Albedo. But unlike Albedo, she actually doesn't seek the truth of this world, which makes her less impactful in a sense. And her thirst is only for pleasing the man who seeks the truth of this world. But her conviction for that is quite high, and for that reason I think I'll stick her probably a little bit above Rosaria, as she most likely will do anything to please her master in a sense and partner in life. So for that reason she probably will have more potential for growth, but she doesn't display enough. So for that reason, middle of the road tier. Now let's talk about Child, also known as Tatali. Now Child has a lot of thirst in him. He had a thirst for fighting, as he will take any chance to pretty much just test himself and fight with anyone and anything, no matter how dangerous or how irresponsible it is. He will pretty much just stop at nothing to test himself and improve himself, which I admire quite a lot, because that's a thirst for violence is always a high thirst in my ranking opinion. So for that reason I think he is already at a river tier, but he also has a thirst for his family well-being, as he will stop at nothing to make sure that his family is doing well, even if it means sacrificing himself, which already puts him at a C tier in my opinion. But he also has the thirst for power and knowledge in a sense, as he climbs rank within Futu Harbingers. So his thirst for ruling authority is also extremely high, and for that reason he goes at the bottom of an ocean tier, as his thirst is more spread out, which unlike Kai's, because Kai's is spread out but it's very high and very focused on his spread, as he focuses his attention on pretty much everything. And Child is mostly focused on fighting, but he has the potential of becoming a second Kai in the future. He just haven't realized himself yet, because he's quite young, quite impressionable, but he has room for growth, and he might become future Kai when he gets to his age. So for that reason, bottom on ocean tier. Now let's talk about Toma. Now Toma has a thirst, which is a thirst for impressing others, especially women, as well as protecting his both masters in the name of Ayato and Ayaka, and he will stop at nothing to achieve that. For that reason I think I put him a little bit below Ayaka, as his thirst for protecting them is probably would make him stick to them as close as possible. So for that reason I'll put him right there. His thirst for other people's attention also is there, but it's not quite on the same level as somebody like Kachin or let's say Mona. So for that reason, middle of a river tier. Now let's talk about Venti. Now Venti does mostly only 3 things in his life, which is reminisce about past, playing his lyre, and drink. And drinking involves pretty much 80% of his free time, as he most likely just hang around Diluc, as Diluc is pretty much his supplier, as Venti doesn't have any money, because he doesn't sing for money, he only sings for attention, and he's drunk all the time, so his thirst is substantial. But unlike these 3, his thirst is more rudimentary, is more primal. So for that reason I think I'll stick him probably at the 4th place of a C tier, as it is important to have thirst, but his thirst is only for booze, which is important, but it's not as important as thirst for money, power, dango milk, or knowledge. For that reason, he's right there. Now let's talk about Ling. Ling has a thirst, which is a thirst for new culinary discoveries, as she stops at nothing to discover new ingredients and cook with them a monstrous dish that probably tastes astronomically good. And she also is a chef, which means she cooks all day. And as we all know, cooking is hard and requires a lot of energy, so she needs to stay hydrated a lot. She probably drinks a lot of water as well. And for that reason, I think I'll stick her at the top of a river tier, as she does have a lot of culinary thirst, and it probably will never be quenched. But culinary thirst is not as important in my opinion as all of these others above her, so for that reason she only garners enough reason to stick her at the top of a river tier, but she has a potential for a C tier in the future. Now Zhao has a very specific thirst, but it's the thirst enough to put him probably at the 4th place, as he had a thirst for never-ending vengeance and misery, pain, torment, destruction. He pretty much an embodiment of torture itself, and his thirst for it is never ending. He will never be quenched, no matter how hard he tries. He will just seek slaughter whenever he goes. So for that reason, he's pretty much at the middle of an ocean tier, and I hope he gets help, and I hope he gets better, because the thirst is not healthy, and I hope he will get it quenched someday. Now let's talk about Shincho. Shincho has a very artistic side to him, which means that he has an artistic thirst, as he's a writer and he also is a bookworm, which means that he has an incredible thirst for knowledge as well as new reading material. So for that reason, I think he has enough reason to stick him at about Albedo, but unlike Albedo, he doesn't seek the truth of this world, but he does seek knowledge. So that garners him enough reason just to stick him a little bit below Albedo in the C tier. Now let's talk about Xin Yang. Now Xin Yang has a thirst for attention as well as making sure that others appreciate her music. And that thirst is never quenched, as she never has enough success to satisfy her burning passion for music. So she will channel that thirst no matter how hard it is, how many tries she needs to take in order to achieve her goals. And that's quite admirable, and in my opinion, she has a fiery personality, and it might help her in the future to realize even more how thirsty she is for both music and just being an awesome individual. For that reason, bottom of a C tier. Now let's talk about Yae Miko. Now Yae Miko is pretty much just like Lisa, has never quenched thirst for both traveler but also knowledge, just like Lisa. However, unlike Lisa, she is not always thirsty. She's thirsty, but she's not always thirsty, as she has a lot of free time to be a shrine maiden as well as a book writer. So she garners just enough to put her at the bottom of an ocean tier, but she has a potential, just like Lisa, to be more in the future and realize her true thirst within her. So there's that. Now let's talk about Yanfei. Yanfei is a lawyer, which means that her thirst for justice is unquenchable, as she's the only lawyer and pretty much just deals with every single legal case within Teyat, most likely, at least for all of these main characters as we know them. So I think just because she the only lawyer within Teyat, it garners her enough recognition to put her probably in the C tier, right at the bottom side of it, because unlike a lot of these other characters, she only thirsts for one thing, and that is well-being of others, as well as making sure that justice is served. So as the Phoenix Wright of the Teyat world, she does garner enough thirst to put her in C tier, but not enough to put her in the ocean tier. So yeah, there's that. Now let's talk about Yoimiya. Yoimiya has a particular thirst of making children happy, as well as making her old man happy and making fireworks to make sure that others are quite mesmerized by them, just like she is. So her thirst is high, but I don't think it's as high as to put her in the C tier, but it's high enough to put her probably at the top 3 of the river tier, just because she most likely just takes everything as a fun thing. She doesn't unleash her thirst fully, and she doesn't display it fully. So for that reason, actually, you know what, let's put her at the bottom of a C tier, just because she has much more potential than all of these other people. And I think that should actually, you know what, let's swap Ling with Yoimiya and put Ling at the bottom of a river tier, because I think Ling actually unleashes her full thirst at the moment, and she has a little bit more of an exponential growth, but Yoimiya has a more of a potential growth. So for that reason, she both should be here. Now let's move on to the next character by the name of Yunjin. Now Yunjin is an opera singer, which means her thirst for artistic interpretation is exceptionally high, but She hails from a wealthy family, which means that her thirst is not exponential. It only goes as far as her family appreciation and recognition, and she most likely just thirsts over being a normal person more than anything. And for that reason, I think I'll stick her probably here, just because her thirst is not as high of a tier ranked as all of these other characters. But she does have a potential for growth when she realized that opera is not everything in life, and she should find a thirst she could truly commit to, and realize it. She has more potential than a lot of other characters if she just puts her mind to it. Now let's talk about Big Daddy, Zhongli. Now Zhongli is a thirsty man. He's thirsty for a variety of reasons. He's thirsty because he's broke most of the time. He's thirsty because he has a tea addiction. He's thirsty because he talks about Samantha's wine pretty much at least 60% of his time. And for that reason he goes as a second person in the ocean tier, ranked second, but he does have more potential than Kaya. And in the future, when he realizes that instead of talking about Samantha's wine and actually drinking tea, he might just start like an OnlyFans or something, and he thirsts for attention, but he doesn't have any right now. So as far as I know, at least, maybe he does. We just don't know about it. But in the future, he's pretty much top of an ocean tier, but as a present only, he just doesn't have enough of a push to decrown Kaya as an ultimate thirst king, at least of right now. Maybe some of these characters can dethrone you. We'll see how it goes. Now let's move on to Ayato. Now Ayato is Ayaka's big brother, and the only thing that he's thirsting for is pretty much just protecting his little sister. So he's a little bit overprotective older brother. He also has a really big thirst for making sure that he knows everything about everyone within Inazuma. So his thirst for weaknesses is quite high, just like Ning 1's. But unlike Ning 1, who actually has malicious intention for gathering secrets, probably for extortion purposes, Ayato just gathers them as a backup plan in case he needs to extort someone. He doesn't actually extort people, but he gathers in case he does need to. So for that reason, he goes probably a little bit below Zhao, as he is thirsty. He's a thirsty man. That's why he has a Hydra vision, but he's not as thirsty just to put him in the top 5. But he is at the 6th place, rightfully so, in my opinion. Now let's move to Kuki Shinobu. Now Kuki Shinobu has a lot of thirsts, one of which being hatred for her parents for making her become a shrine maiden in her youth. Another being never-ending thirst for pretty much just helping out Ito realize his true potential, as well as making sure that he doesn't get into trouble. She also has a lot of thirst for being the only capable member of our Arataki gang, and she probably wants all of its members to become more like her, so her thirst for leadership is quite high, and she might dethrone Ito as the second Arataki gang leader. So just because her potential for growth is a little bit higher than Ito, in my opinion, I'll put her a little bit above Ito right here in the C tier. Now let's move on to Yellen. Yellen is an interesting case, as she's pretty much just thirsty for dominating over others. She's thirsty for gathering intel, and she's thirsty for making sure that others show her respect and the respect to her authority as a result. So I think for that reason she goes a little bit above Shincho, as she's thirsty. She's a thirsty woman, she's a dominating woman, and her thirst is quite high for power, for respect, so that others know their place, which is beneath her feet, as most of you would probably imagine so. So that garners her enough reason to push her at a C tier. Now let's talk about Hazel. Hazel is a detective, just like a lot of other characters like Yanfei and maybe even Fischl. But his detectiveness goes as far as pretty much just doing whatever he wants. He follows only his own convictions, but he does have thirst for truth, and he will most likely stop at nothing to uncover the truth, and he only brings good results. He's also pretty much a knockoff version of Kazuha, but unlike Kazuha, he's a little bit more selfish, as he pretty much just works on whoever and whatever he wants, and he doesn't follow rules, which makes him a little bit of an unconventional detective, as he's pretty much like an anti-hero more than anything. And for that reason, I think I'll stick him above Bennett, just a little bit below Yanpei, because the Yanpei follows the law, and she's the lawyer, but Hazel is just a detective, so he's a lawyer wannabe. For that reason, a little bit of a bottom of a C tier. Now let's move on. Tighnari. Tighnari has a quiet and quenchable thirst for knowledge, just like a lot of these characters, but unlike a lot of these characters, he's an actual scholar, and he studies botanism in an extensive way, as he knows pretty much everything there is to know about flora and fauna of Sumeru, which makes him exceptionally thirsty for knowledge, as it takes a large amount of effort, time and dedication to learn a lot of what he knows already, and he keeps learning more with every single passing day and passing it towards others. He also has an unquenchable thirst for lecturing others and making sure to put others just like Yellen, just so they know their place which is beneath him, as he is more superior to a lot of people. And for that reason, I think I put him above Yellen, but not a little bit above Albedo, just because Albedo is still searching for truth of the world, but Tighnari is just searching for people that he can bully and makes him more superior as a result, just like Yellen. So for that reason, he goes a little bit of an upper echelon of a C tier. Now, let's talk about Collei. And Collei, just like Tighnari, is a ranger, so she knows a lot about forest, but unlike Tighnari, she doesn't have a lot of convictions, besides revenge, which she tries to suppress for two that abused her, and also for people that she used to hate, but she suppresses them and tries to be a better person. But just because she has a potential of becoming like a mass murderer in the future and have a potential thirst for that, as well as being a good person, so that's kind of two contradictory thirsts at the same time, which makes it an interesting case. And I think they garners enough attention to put her probably a little bit above Bennett right here, as her thirst is quite substantial and it might even grow even higher in the future. Now let's talk about Dory. Now Dory, just like Ning 1, only cares about money, but unlike Ning 1, she actually willing to do anything it takes to make money, because Ning 1 has a little bit of convictions. She actually wouldn't put others in danger no matter what, but Dory would. Dory would probably sell her own soul for a few extra moras if she could. So for that reason, I think she probably is a top 3 of an ocean tier, as her convictions, her desire and her overall thirst for money is nothing to scoff at, and she will stop at nothing to achieve her dreams of becoming the wealthiest individual and becoming pretty much the second coming of Morax and just print money herself in the future. For that reason, she's in the top 3. Now let's talk about Candice. Now Candice is an interesting case, because the only things that she says for is jewelry that she likes to collect, as well as protecting others. And she sacrifices her own well-being to achieve those two. And she pretty much just only buys jewelry in her spare time when she gets the chance from traveling merchants. But she also only protects people and doesn't spend a lot of time on herself, which makes her quite thirsty for other people's well-being. So for that reason, just because her thirst is quite high, I think I'll put her a little bit above Shincho, right at the C tier. As her thirst for protecting others is immense, she pretty much would sacrifice herself just to save others if that's what situation calls for. So that's admirable, and her thirst is quite high, so for that reason C tier. Now Sino. Sino is an officer of law, just like Amber. But unlike Amber, he actually holds a general position of a law enforcer, which means that he pretty much is the law, and his thirst for law and enforcing law is much higher than that of the Yanfei, because the Yanfei just enforces the law, but Sino is the law, which puts him pretty much in the ocean tier in my opinion. Probably even above Child, as the only thing that Sino cares about is pretty much punishing the criminals. He would go at the ends of the earth just to capture criminals. He doesn't care what it takes, even if he has to go to the ends of the earth to gather them, as is depicted within his lore. There was even a book written about him going on a journey to capture criminals throughout the desert. So for that reason, I think I'll stick him at the bottom of an ocean tier, as his thirst for law and only law is admirable, but it's not quite as thirsty as the law of these other characters, but it's still thirsty enough to put him in an ocean tier. Now let's talk about Nilo. Nilo is a dancer, which means that she's an entertainer, and she puts performance above all else, and she wants people to have a good time within her shows. So it shows her thirst for great achievements within her life. She wants others to be happy, she wants others to have a good time, and she wants others to make sure that they have an incredible experience that will last a lifetime for them. So just because her thirst for a good show, unlike Barbara, who is just thirsty for attention, who is also an entertainer, I think I'll put her at about top of a river tier, just because her thirst is not as selfish. She just wants others to be happy and entertained as a result of her performances. So I think middle of a... Actually, you know what? Let's put her at the bottom of a C tier, just because of her convictions of putting on a good show. I think it deserves for her to be at least at the bottom of a C tier. Now let's talk about two of the characters that weren't released yet, but will be in the upcoming update, which I think are still worth talking about as like quite interesting individuals. First of which being Loyola, who is a student of the Sumeru Academia, and the only thing that we know so far is that she could be thirsty for is doing her homework. So she's pretty much a straight A student, and she wants just nothing more than being a good student, as well as adoration of her teachers and her peers, and that is important to her. So for that reason, I'll stick her at about lake tier, probably a little bit below Kazuha, as she's just a schoolgirl who wants the best grades so she can go into good job in the future, which is admirable, but it's not as interesting as a lot of these other thirsts that we discussed today. So I think for now at least, maybe in the future when we know a little bit more about her, I think for now she's in the lake tier, just a little bit below Kazuha. And lastly, let's talk about a new and upcoming Archon, also known as Nahida. So Nahida is an Archon, but she's also a child, or at least she looks like one. And for that reason, I think she most likely would be similar to Cleve. But unlike Cleve, she doesn't actually seek destruction. The only things she seeks is happiness for her own people. Though the only things that she's thirsty for is well-being of others, as well as making sure that others have a good time within her own realm, as a god of that realm in a sense. So I think for now, I'll stick her at about, I'd say probably in a lake tier as well as of right now, just because we don't know much about this character. But I think just because her well-being of all this concern is quite admirable, I think I'll put her at the top of a lake tier as of right now. But she does have a lot of potential. She might be discovered as a second Klee, and she might want this world to burn in the future. But as of right now, she seems like a very caring individual that wants nothing more than for her people to be happy. So her thirst is admirable, but it's not high enough to garner her a higher ranking positions within the tier list, at least for now. So that's my tier list. I think that should do it. Make sure to let me know your own thirsts and how you would rank some or even all of them. and I was late. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.